Well, prior to George Kliavkoff's arrival, the Pac-12 made a long string of mistakes that we've talked about repeatedly here on the show that put them in this situation. But they could avoid some kind of newer mistakes in the next round of realignment, or at least I hope they will.
You are Locked On Pac-12, your daily podcast on the Pac-12 Conference. It's the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Locked On Pac-12. I'm your host, Spencer McLaughlin. Thank you so much for making this your first listen or your first view of the day. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, and your number one source to stay up to date with our media rights-free and beloved Conference of Champions. Like, comment, subscribe, rate, review, please, and thank you wherever you listen to or watch this show. Traction on the channel, on YouTube in particular, has been popping off for the last month or so. And we haven't had a football game since around January time. So appreciate all of you continuing to support the show very, very much. And if you're new here, you can be an everydayer like so many of you out there are. But lots to get to today. A lesson for George Kliavkoff, maybe a couple. A new situation for Oregon State to be in. And why not Fresno State to the Pac? What do you want to know? And I shall explain. But this question came in from Eric. Quote, by the way, mailbag always open forever and always, whether you're a Pac-12, SEC, Big 12, Big 10, ACC fan, or independent, whatever floats your boat. You can always get the mailbag. YouTube comments or hit me up on Twitter at smalls_55 or at LO_Pac-12. DMs and mentions wide open. Eric asks, I hadn't really thought about the Pac crafting a deal that expires a year before the Big 10 and the SEC. What would be the rationale behind that besides getting to market first? To what degree might it have something to do with locking in their schools before those conferences come calling? Also, might the Pac look to add another couple of schools before going to market again? I've said this before, I think the most logical choices would essentially be complements for San Diego State and SMU, and Eric thinks it'd be UNLV and Rice. Kind of tough sells there, but despite their lack of athletic success, Rice has indeed received a conference promotion from Conference USA to the American. Just saying, like we always say, who votes on realignment? Presidents. Anyway, okay, so to get into the meat of the question here, but which I think is an interesting one and has a couple of different components here that I want to make sure I get into. So what we're talking about here is the timeline for what the Pac-12 media deal could be, what the grant of rights would be, when the deal would expire, when they could hit the market again. I think it's a twofold interest for the Pac-12 to be first on the market rather than last. So if you are first on the market, if the Pac-12 media deal were to expire ahead of the 2028-2029 athletics season, and you needed a deal for that year, or 2030, right? The Big 12 expires, I think, 31. So if you're on the market before them, you have the opportunity at that point in time to solidify your conference and perhaps, potentially, maybe, possibly have a better chance of avoiding further, poaching from other conferences there. But I think the biggest advantage, frankly, for the Pac-12 of going to market before the other conferences is you're trying to set yourself up for success as much as possible. And the trajectory of live sports broadcasts and the value of television deals since the turn of the century has done nothing but go up, 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 up. I don't have an indication at this point in time that that's not going to be the case. So let's assume, for instance, the Pac-12, has a 5-year deal that starts in 2024, 2025 for that athletic season, and that gets them on the market sooner. If the valuation of the conference and their media rights increase between now and then, which it certainly could, it's not a guarantee, but every media deal has been more valuable than the one that preceded it. And whatever deal the Pac-12 ends up getting here, that's likely going to be the case. The last one paid, I believe, somewhere in the ballpark of like $21 million per school per year. That was signed a long, long time ago in a galaxy far, far away. So let's assume it would be even more valuable. If you're able to position your conference in a place that gives them a strong enough valuation at that point in time, going to market sooner might limit the ability of another conference who's not on the market yet and doesn't have a deal to go for and hasn't renegotiated. It might limit the ability, I think, of Oregon or Washington or Stanford or Cal or Utah or anybody, right? Colorado, Arizona, whoever, to explore their options elsewhere. Because if those media deals, now, the Big 12 has a pro rata clause in there for adding Power 5 schools that would, be continuing at that point in time. But I think if you get there sooner, it allows you to make more moves. Whereas when you're the ACC, you feel like you're stuck, right? The ACC feels stuck. They're locked into that deal. Schools wanted to get out of it. They can't. Yeah, they're just kind of stuck. They're set in that deal. So it limits the options for the conference. It limits the options for the teams within the conference. Now, if the Big Ten were to, come and say 2028 and extend an offer to the Bay Area schools, Oregon and Washington, or all four of them, I do suspect that they would say yes at that point in time. But the Pac-12 would, at the very least, I think, be given an opportunity perhaps, because the timing of when the next round of realignment is going to come down, we don't really know. We don't really know. But the Big 12 got its deal done first and then has tried to come hunting and poaching for Pac-12 schools ever since that deal got done. The Big Ten did it the other way, so it's not necessarily a guarantee, but I think by going to market first, you would present the opportunity to make moves, to be aggressive, to try and set yourself up to where your conference is in a state of flux, yes, but you can make that an influx rather than an outflux if you're not locked and trapped into a media deal there, the way the ACC is right now. So I think that's one of the advantages. The other advantage as well of kind of operating on that timeline, if you're the Pac-12, is you give any expansion teams you add now, San Diego State and SMU perhaps, sufficient time to build themselves up as television brands. And look, Utah was not a full media rights earning member for the first few years they were in the league, and then they were. And Utah, I think you could argue, had a stronger football brand than, from a success standpoint, than San Diego State and SMU. In fact, I think you can make that case pretty easily. So it was probably a little bit more on the momentum front. Those schools might have some, building and brand establishment to do. Utah had an undefeated season. They'd won a Sugar Bowl. They'd won conference championships. Like, they'd done, some really, really good stuff. SMU has a lot of money. San Diego State has had some good seasons and some bad ones as well, but not the likes of which Utah had there. So I think the following that they can generate, the brands they can become in college football, will have had time to grow at that point. And you might be able to, depending on what the language is here in in the first media rights deal, you might be able to get them a greater share or a full share of the media deal. Look, maybe it only takes 3 years for them to, ramp up to that point, but maybe the conference and the media executives think it's going to take 5 or 6. But it would give them a reasonable amount of time to do that, and then you could make that adjustment at that point in time. Now, as for the second question, what the Pac-12 should do in the meantime with regards to realignment is indeed an interesting one. A lot of interesting bets you can place at FanDuel as well. And you can take your first swing at betting Major League Baseball on FanDuel and get 10 times your first bet amount in bonus bets, up to $200. That's right, $20 and you'll land $200 in bonus bets, win or lose. That's $200 you can spend betting everything from the money line to the over-under to who you think is going to hit the first home run to whether or not you think there will be a perfect game, as there was yesterday. Germán of the Yankees perfect gamed. Who else? The Oakland A's. You can bet all of that on an app that's safe, secure, secure, and super easy to use. Plus, when you win, you can get paid instantly. There's no better place to bet on Major League Baseball than FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. Sign up today and visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get up to $200 in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon. FanDuel, official partner of Major League Baseball. Boy, you could hear at the end of that first segment, I really needed that second segment sip. We really needed that one. Not so much for the dry mouth, but the throat, the coughing was coming up. That's why it's essential to give you the best quality product I possibly can. I appreciate you listening or watching the show. I got to give you my very best every single day. You deserve nothing less. So that's the first part of Eric's question. The second part here. Might the Pac look to add another couple of schools before going to market again? I've said this before. I think the most logical choices would essentially be complements for San Diego State and SMU, those being UNLV and Rice. They could. I think it really, really depends on how successful the conference is football-wise. Men's basketball, sure, but especially on the football field, I think it depends on how much success they have there and whether or not they can afford to, take on 2 more G5 schools. That will depend on how quickly San Diego State and SMU, assuming those are the additions, can get acclimated to the Power 5 level, how quickly they can become conference contenders, how quickly they can become relevant, how quickly they can become interesting and respected brands, competitive teams, fielding them year in and year out, yada, yada, yada. So I think it depends on that. And it also depends on how successful the conference is being on a national scale. Because if you're the Pac-12, what is your ultimate goal as a conference? Win a national championship in as many sports as possible, preferably the ones that we haven't seen since 2004, 2005, that season. But you understand what I'm saying with USC. And in men's basketball, the last one was Arizona in 1997, I believe the year was. It has been a minute, as the kids say. So I don't think they would look at adding other G5 schools unless the conference was thriving in a place where they'd maybe had a couple teams playing a national championship game. They were getting to the playoff every year, which they're probably going to be doing anyway with the 12-team playoff. Like almost assuredly, they'll get to the technically speaking, just so we're all aware, the Pac-12 is not guaranteed a slot. They're essentially guaranteed a slot. There's a guaranteed slot to the 6 highest rated conference champions. That does not say Power 5 and 1 G5. That's what it'll end up being. But in theory, you could have the ACC, Big 10, SEC, Big 12 champions, and then the American and Conference USA champions ranked ahead of the Pac-12 champion, and then the Pac-12 champion does get one of those 6 automatic berths. But guess what? Even if that crazy and unlikely scenario comes to pass, yeah, that Pac-12 champion is still going to be inside the top 12. I don't know that there's been a year in which the Pac-12 hasn't had a top 12 team there by the time the conference championship comes to a close. Like even this past year, right? Utah was, I think, in the 2017 to 20 range when they were playing 4th-ranked USC, right? So Utah outside the top 12. But then you get a bump from beating the 4th-ranked team, and the 4th-ranked team is not going to fall down all the way out of the top 12. Alas, they did not. So that's, again, a technicality, but an interesting one to look at there. But I think it would really depend on the position of the conference, whether or not they felt that, their next media deal, not this current one that we're all waiting on day by day, of course, but the next one, whether or not they felt that it would be so valuable they could afford to take on a couple more G5 schools, and whether or not they felt that it would really add value to the conference, because San Diego State and SMU bring a lot of things to the league that we've talked about before. Geography for both the media side of things and the alumni and student body side of things for the presidents, who, of course, drive realignment. Yeah, we said it again. Feeling like Jeff Goldblum today. My favorite Jeff Goldblum line ever, just as a quick aside, he's doing an interview and someone asks him, like, what would you say if someone asked you this question? First, how dare you speak to me? So Goldblum is a national treasure. Anyway, where was I? Let's get back. Let's try to get back on track. That's the problem with my asides sometimes. I think they're kind of funny. I hope some of you think they're at least mildly amusing. That's all I'm really going for, right? Is when I have an improv joke, just like mildly amusing. As long as I get that from some people and like a laugh out of 2, I'm good. And I think that's, overall a successful joke. But in terms of the league, you have to be in such a strong position. You have to feel really, really good about where your finances are. I don't anticipate that that'd be the case. And you would also have to have G5 brands that would be able to add the sort of value that San Diego State and SMU can right now, right? Geography, location, recruiting, alumni, student body, all this sort of stuff, needing the inventory as well. That's what they add. Pac-12 wouldn't need inventory at that point in time. Now, maybe the landscape is different, right? Maybe the Big 12 and the Pac-12 are behind the 8 ball too much at that point in time, and only having 12 schools, that's archaic, that's old school, you can't have that, you need more. Maybe you do. Maybe you do. But I think for adding other G5 schools, I don't know that that'd be as likely. I think if you're the Pac-12, and look, this is kind of cutthroat and it's not particularly likely. I'm just saying this is where the Pac-12 would probably like to be, knowing what we know about the realignment space now. They would probably like to position themselves as the vastly superior conference to the Big 12 and try to get a couple of those Big 12 schools to jump over the way the Big 12 has been trying to get Pac-12 schools to jump over. Now, I don't really want that to happen unless we're doing a full double conference merger here. But if you're the Pac-12, it kind of feels like you're either the hunter or the hunted. And they have been the hunted for the last, year and a half or however long we've been talking about all this realignments. It hasn't even been, what's crazy? It hasn't even been, I don't think, a full calendar year, or it's just been about one calendar year since USC and UCLA announced they were leaving the Pac-12 for the Big Ten starting next year. And it feels like we've undergone, 7 lifetimes since then. I feel like Puss in Boots, I'm on my 9th life. Anyway, decent movie, Puss in Boots, The Last Wish. Not bad at all. Pretty entertaining. Okay, anyway, so those are my answers to those particular questions. This one also came in from Eric. Don't worry, there's a non-Eric question on today's show as well. And this will be a general theme going forward. We'll continue to cover and talk about realignment. I see the numbers on podcasts, on YouTube. I know that's what you are all interested in the most. I find it fascinating. It's interesting. The angles, the speculation, the rumors, the, yada, yada, yada. It can be really, really exciting. I am going to try to at least once a day have an actual honest-to-God football topic. I know it's a revolutionary concept. I know it might not be what's going to get the most attention and whatnot, but for all you everydayers out there, I know that it can be a nice little break from the media and rights and realignment stuff to just talk about some actual football, because there will be football at some point. Eventually, this will become a football-oriented podcast, but in the offseason, realignment rues the day. Runs the day, not rues it. No, you will not rue this day, Carly Shay. Classic episode of iCarly. You'll rue the day. Okay, wow, this is what happens when I record a podcast too late at night. I just get in these moods, and I just feel sorry for all you everydayers who stick with me. But man, I appreciate you all so very, very much. Okay. Next question here from Eric, football-wise. Why do you think putting the Beavs at number 24 in the ESPN Football Power Index is the right spot for them? Don't you think OSU's schedule sets the Beavs up about as nicely as possible for a Cinderella season? So, the Football Power Index is not a reflection of how you could perform this year. It is a reflection of how ESPN measures your capability of being favored in relation to other teams, and also how you would match up against other teams in the country. It's like a roster assessment, team assessment, coach assessment. I don't know exactly what goes into that, but basically, Football Power Index is out there to measure kind of, what's the moxie of your team? What's the maximum potential? What's the ceiling? What's all this sort of stuff? But I think Oregon State is in a spot that they haven't been in a lot for the last several years, which is they have actual expectations and goals, maybe not expectations, more goals of reaching the Pac-12 championship, something they have never done as a program. No, your audio did not cut out. I had to let that sit there for a second. Oregon State is one of just 3 programs to never make it. Even Colorado has made it. But Oregon State, Washington State, and Cal, my beloved California Golden Bears, they're still, not actually, but like rhetorically, everydayers know what I'm talking about. But they're still trying to get to that game for the first time. And Jonathan Smith has now put them in a great position. Here's why. ESPN's FPI putting them at number 24 means they expect them to be a good team. FanDuel having them at an over-under win total of 8.5 means they expect them to have success on their schedule. Those two things can be unrelated, right? Or not completely reflective of one another. You could have a high win total, but not a really high FPI. But the expectations here for Oregon State are such that if they are not contending for a spot in the Pac-12 championship game, that'll be a disappointment. Not getting there won't, I don't think, in my view, be a massive letdown for the Beavs. But if they're not even close to it, if they don't sniff it, if they go 3-0 in conference play or in non-conference play, and they were to go 4-5 in conference play and finish the regular season 7-5, that would be a disappointment, because that means you're not putting yourself in the upper echelon of Pac-12 teams. But UCLA has also got a win total of 8.5. They're not in the top 25 according to ESPN's FPI. They might be an AP top 25 preseason team. We'll see when all that sort of stuff comes out. But is Oregon State set up for a Cinderella run? I don't think it's a Cinderella run at this point, other than the fact that they haven't been to the Pac-12 championship game before, that they are yet to be there. Now, they've played for the opportunity to go to a Rose Bowl. They did so twice in 2008 and 2009, but they have not reached a conference championship game in their program's history. They're trying to do that for the first time. They're trying to win 10 games in back-to-back seasons for the first time ever. And Oregon State's not going to sneak up on anybody, right? Last year, I was talking about them as a dark horse team, like, I think they're kind of on the rise, and I loved them over 5.5, and that was an easy bet if you cashed that at FanDuel. But this year, they're not sneaking up on anybody. It would still have, I think, a magical feeling for Oregon State fans to reach the Pac-12 championship game. But to describe it as a complete and total Cinderella run, they're not an underdog here. They're not going to be underdogs in a lot of games this season. When you look at their schedule, they're going to be favored in a lot more than they are not. They'll be underdogs against Oregon. They'll be underdogs against. Let me pull up their schedule real quick so I can just double check that I'm not missing any games here. But I don't think there are a lot of opportunities for them to be underdogs. That's why I wouldn't describe it as a Cinderella situation. You know, that's where, you know, the underdog is just making a run. It's magical. It's all that sort of stuff. They have an opportunity to get to the Pac-12 championship game. Their schedule sets up really favorably with their home and road splits. But their games, San Diego State on the road, favored. UC Davis, obviously favored. San Diego State at home, they will be favored. At Washington State, probably a small favorite. That'd be my guess, small favorite. Utah at home, could be an underdog there. Could definitely be an underdog there. At Research Stadium, though, that game's probably close to a pick'em. At Cal, favored. Against UCLA at home, definitely favored. At Arizona, favored. Colorado should be favored. Stanford favored. Washington at home, probably an underdog. Oregon on the road, definitely going to be an underdog there. So that's 4 games at the most, I think, where Oregon State will go in and be an underdog in the eyes of the betting market. So I think it's a great spot for Oregon State to be in. I think their schedule sets them up for success very well. I think they have a team that, you know, lost some key players from a year ago, but has brought in a key player at the most important position, a quarterback, and DJ Uiagalelei, and they have an opportunity, right? And like I said, it wouldn't be a Cinderella season. It wouldn't be a letdown if they didn't get to the Pac-12 championship game. You know, if they were to go, 10-2 and not get in because of tiebreakers, or 9-3 and 7-2 in conference play or something, not get in because of tiebreakers, like that's, you know, sometimes that's the way the cookie crumbles. I don't think that'd be a letdown per se, but just to have that as a realistic goal, right? A Cinderella run to the Pac-12 championship game would be Washington State, right? Or any of those right column teams as I've described them. But I need to have that graphic ready to go for next time, and I promise I will. But anyway, I think that's where Oregon State is at. It's a new place for them to be, where they're saying, okay, we need to win these games, not because we want to, not because we're trying to build. We've been building. They've been slowly escalating bit by bit. And now they're trying to pay it off with that big next step. They've taken a lot of really, really good substantive steps. Now they're trying to take a moonwalk-sized leap and get to that conference championship game. So, good question. Love that thought. All right, let's wrap up with this. From TT Trading. Hey, Spencer, why isn't Fresno State ever mentioned in Pac-12 expansion talks? Seems like a decent get, as it gives the Pac-12 another Cali school, and Fresno is a pretty good football team that could compete in most Power 5 conferences. Yet you won't hear any arguments from me. Now, you might be a little bit newer here, TT Trading, but for all my everydayers out there, we know that going on my gravestone, however long I may live, is going to be the phrase, presidents vote on realignment. And presidents drive realignment is the message behind that particular incantation on my tombstone. Incantation is not the right word. That implies it's sort of a spell. That sort of message that will be chiseled into my tombstone there. But the point that is behind it is that athletics are a major consideration in conference realignment. They are not, never have been, nor will they ever be the only factor. Now, academics play a role for some conferences more than others. The Big 12 doesn't particularly care about them. The Big 10 absolutely does. The SEC, kind of. The ACC definitely does. The Pac-12 definitely does. So, and USC and UCLA going to the Big 10, yeah, that's an athletics thing. That's a media market thing. It's also a research and conference alignment on that sort of stuff thing, because USC and UCLA are very well respected academic institutions. If it were just about sports, you would have added USC and Oregon, but you're adding UCLA is a much better school than Oregon. UCLA is in a bigger media market than Oregon, and that sort of stuff factors into it. So, to get back to your question here, that the considerations for presidents and chancellors to drive realignment and determine who's important, who do we want, who could we add, all this sort of stuff. It's a multifaceted analysis, and athletic success is a part of it. But for the Pac-12, we know academic success is another part of it. And Fresno State and Boise State, I would love to add both of them. My dream realignment scenario, I have long stated this on the show, San Diego State, SMU, Fresno, and Boise State, because I love their athletics programs, particularly their football teams. Basketball, not super duper worried about that sort of stuff. But football-wise, if you wanted to strengthen your conference as well as you can with geographical, logic, and also adding a little bit of reach, San Diego State and SMU get you into SoCal, get you into Dallas, Boise and Fresno right in the Pac-12 footprints, and they've had successful football programs for a long time now. And Fresno State, by the way, walloped Washington State in the Jimmy Kimmel LA Bowl a season ago. Now, Washington State had lost both their coordinators, but still, your point about, hey, they could compete in Power 5 conferences, yeah, that's absolutely correct. 100% they could do that. And if you gave them Power 5 money, yeah, they'd probably be able to get up to speed pretty quickly. And ask UCLA, ask Oregon, and everybody else who's played Fresno State over the years. I think they ended up beating them pretty handily. But, Fresno State even gave USC some fits. Like, they could move the ball, they could score. Like, that's where Kalen DeBoer, Washington's coach, of course, came from, because he had a wildly successful run there. Beat a good UCLA team in 2021 on the road at the Rose Bowl. Almost beat Oregon at Autzen Stadium in 2021 as well. So they have had a great program tradition there. But academically, Fresno and Boise are not even remotely close, unfortunately. I want to make this inexplicably clear. It is much to my chagrin that is the case. Like, I talk about this stuff all the time because I know that it does matter and it does factor into how decisions get made. It is not how I would like the decisions to be made, just to be clear. I don't care about the academic side of it. I don't work in academics. I work in athletics. That's what I care about. I'm not watching kids take a test or collect research dollars with alumni on Saturdays. I'm watching football, and that's what I'm here for. So you're 100% right that Fresno State athletically would be a good addition, and I think Boise as well. But They don't present. Now, there are a lot of homes in the Central Valley of California, but it doesn't have, I don't believe, the same allure to conference presidents that Southern California does financially from a media market standpoint and also an alumni standpoint. It just doesn't, and the student body as well factors into that. It doesn't have the same sort of weight that SoCal does, especially now that they're losing USC and UCLA. And the other thing too is my understanding in talking to people who have a better read on this situation than I do is that Fresno State is kind of in Central California, yes, but it is most closely associated with Northern California, and they kind of have that market pretty well covered with Stanford and Cal. So it's not as high of a priority. Now, if one day Boise State and Fresno State were to make, drastic leaps and bounds of improvements in the academics, on the academic side of things, yeah, they could get in. They could definitely be candidates there. But at this time, those are kind of the reasons. It doesn't bring in new areas that the conference presidents really want to be a part of. They don't pass the academic smell test. And the other thing too is 2 teams is, as I talked about on yesterday's show, 2 teams is probably the right number for the Pac-12 at this point in time anyway. And so they're further down the list compared to San Diego State and SMU. But a great question. I respect the hell out of the Bulldogs. Always have, always will. They're more than capable in the football field of competing in Power 5 conference. Take notice, Big 12. If I were the Big 12 and I wanted to expand west, I would look at Fresno State and Boise State. Maybe the Pac-12 will do it one day. We'll just have to wait and see. Appreciate everyone listening. I will see you next time. And until then, hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.